Have a good one, team. Peace out. What's up everyone? UHS-1 Class 1 micro SD card from the same manufacturer, namely Samsung. For those of you who didn't know, the U3 cards have a minimum write speed of 30 megabytes per second, whereas U1 cards have a minimum write speed of 10 megabytes per second. This is a significant difference, and especially critical when writing or recording large amounts of data rapidly, for example when recording 4K video footage. My goals in today's test are to find out if the microSD port on the Nintendo Switch can make use of the increased write speeds provided by a 4K ready U3 card, as well as to determine if it's worth it to consider purchasing a U3 speed microSD card when you're buying storage for your Switch. Are the load times reduced? And if so, by how much? Is it really worth considering this at all? So with me here today, I have both a 128GB U1 Samsung microSD card with the model number of MB-MC128D, as well as my brand new 256GB U3 Samsung Evo Plus microSD card with the model number of MB-MC256GA. In this video, you'll see me conduct a number of different tests regarding the installation times when installing eShop content in NSP file format from the SD card, as well as comparing the load screens within games between both cards to see if there's any difference in load times. Also, just for fun, I'll be doing some comparisons of the load speeds when compared against the Switch's built-in 32GB internal NAND, as well as comparing the speeds of games launched from both the .xci format against the same games that have been installed in the proper .nsp content format as well. So this will help us find out if there's any load speed differences when you're playing XCI or NSP formatted games. Now, in the interest of providing a full disclosure on my testing methods used for this video, I'm going to be using the exFAT file system on both of my cards here. I just prefer exFAT as it allows me to work with large files without needing to split things up at all. And I'll also be cold booting my Switch before each test, with the hopes that this will make the system cache be in an almost identical state each time I test something. So with all of that out of the way, let's get into some testing here. So let's start things off by demonstrating one of the most obvious performance advantages you gain when you use a U3 microSD card instead of U1. This is the increased write speed available when you copy content from your PC across to the microSD card when using a high-speed adapter. When I transfer data to my microSD cards, I make sure to connect them to my computer using a USB 3 adapter and a USB 3 port. I use a Lexar USB 3 microSD adapter, which I received some time ago bundled with an SD card that I purchased. I'll be sure to feature all of the parts used in this video towards the end of the video if you're interested in picking anything up for yourself. But yeah, it's important to be using a USB 3 speed adapter and port to ensure that you're getting the fastest write speeds when copying content to your high-speed microSD cards. Using a regular USB 2 adapter or USB 2 ports would definitely be a bottleneck in this sort of testing that we're doing here. So to help demonstrate those speed differences here, I decided to time how long it takes to send this Valkyria Chronicles 4 demo NSP file from my computer over to both the U1 and U3 Samsung microSD cards. This is a file which is just over 4.2 gigabytes in size. So first up, when I copy paste this file onto my U1 SD card, it takes a total time of around 3 minutes and 45 seconds to complete the transfer, with an average speed of about 20 megabytes per second. And then when we copy paste that same file onto the U3 SD card, it takes just over 1 minute and 2 seconds to complete the transfer, with an average speed of 70 megabytes per second. So when we compare these two transfers, we can see that having a U3 SD card has the obvious advantage of transferring data at rates of up to 3.5 times faster than if you're transferring it to a U1 SD card. So this was the only advantage I was sure of when I purchased this card. Whether or not it would have any advantages when being used inside the Nintendo Switch, I had no idea. Now I'm definitely curious to learn if the Nintendo Switch can make use of these higher read-write rates. So the next test that I've got lined up here is I've moved the same two games onto each of the SD cards. They're both medium-sized games, namely the Valkyria Chronicles 4 demo, as well as Taiko no Tatsujin, the rhythm game. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to time how long it takes to install each of these files from the SD card with the micro SD card as the destination target. So this is a pretty good benchmark test because not only is it reading data from the SD card, it's also installing the game and writing data onto the same SD card. So this is some pretty heavy input-output bandwidth going on here. So I run Executor's custom firmware on my Switch, and this is their ROM menu screen which allows us to install NSP files. So first up, let's take a look at that same Valkyria Chronicles 4 demo, and we're going to time how long it takes to install first on the U1 slower SD card here. Okay, so it took a total time of 7 minutes and 57 seconds to install the game on the U1 SD card. It's only taken 3 minutes and 6 seconds to install the game on the U3 SD card. So as we can see, the content has installed 2.5 times faster on the U3 SD card, and I was very happy to see this result as it confirms to me that the Nintendo Switch is capable of using the increased write rates on the U3 SD cards. So I suspect we'll continue to see there's definitely a lot of time you can save during installation of NSP content thanks to U3 SD cards. So next up, I timed how long it would take to install Taiko no Tatsujin. So on the U1 SD card, it took a total time of 5 minutes and 56 seconds. And on the U3 SD card, it took 2 minutes and 17 seconds. So again, we can see that the content was installed 2.5 times faster on the U3 SD card. So those are both two medium to small sized games. Next, I thought it might be fun to take a look at an actual large game on the Nintendo Switch. So for my next test, I decided to choose Resident Evil Revelations 2. This is a game with a file size of approximately 25 gigabytes, so it's definitely one of the larger games on the Nintendo Switch's library at this point. So I'm willing to bet that we'll see some serious time shaved off here with the U3 SD card. Let's check the figures now. So installing Resident Evil Revelations 2 on the U1 card, it took a whopping 53 minutes and 40 seconds. Installing it on the U3 card took 16 minutes and 47 seconds. So with this larger file size game, the content was installed 3.2 times faster on the U3 card here. The U3 installation completed 37 minutes faster than the U1 installation, so that is some serious time shaved off there. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to test was some actual in-game load screens. So I started up Resident Evil Revelations 2 on each of the SD cards, and after you select New Game, before the initial cutscene plays, there's quite a lengthy load screen, so I timed that on each of the SD cards. Now the results here were much less extreme. It took the U1 SD card 50 total seconds to get through this load screen, whereas it took the U3 SD card 48 seconds to get through that load screen, so only 2 seconds faster. Results like this were actually much more in line with what I was expecting when I started these tests, because when you think about it, load screens are just reading data, so it makes a lot of sense that the increased write speeds available on the U3 SD card don't have much impact here at all. So I did one more load screen test here, and I wanted to get some extra data out of this one. So the game we're going to be looking at now is Bayonetta 2. So we're going to be measuring the load screen that happens after you select New Game and before the first cutscene plays, just like we did with Resident Evil Revelations 2. However, to get a little bit more data out of this test, I'm also going to be comparing between the NSP installed version of the game and the XCI mounted version of the game. So for those of you not following the Nintendo Switch homebrew scene closely, an XCI file is basically an image file of a Nintendo Switch cartridge, whereas an NSP file is basically a container file which has all of the game's contents included. NSP files are what the developers submit to Nintendo's eShop, and when you install content from the eShop, you are installing NSP files. Since the Executor custom firmware has no trouble mounting and running games from XCI format, or installing content and running it from NSP format, I thought it would be fun to compare the speeds when playing the games from each of these methods. And for one final little test, I also installed Bayonetta 2 into my system's internal NAND storage. I always assumed that the system's internal storage would be the fastest storage available on the